The onset of a new Trackmania season means yet another Trackmania tier list. However, ranking every single seasonal track on the plus-minus rating scale wasn't enough for me. Recently, I did my ultimate campaign video ranking every single Trackmania campaign track, and that list is now updated with the Summer 23 seasonal tracks. And spoilers if you have not seen it, as per my rankings in that video, the last 3 seasons have been in a downtrend in terms of track quality. So will we see that continue today, or will this season finally be the one that reverses that trend? I guess we'll see very shortly here as we start with track number 1. With this track and white tracks in general, I have a pretty hard time ranking these as the tracks don't really have a lot going on, they're fairly basic. At least this one, we have a couple of speed slide opportunities, we also have a couple of water bounces, and a no slide uphill, which I'm generally not the biggest fan of no slides, but this one was fairly easy to do. And out of the track number 1s, I gave this one 5th place. And for the plus-minus ranking for this one, I would give it a plus. As far as track number 2 goes, I really enjoyed this track, and track 2s over the recent seasons have been extremely good in my opinion, and have been the bright spots of the white series. Unfortunately for leaderboard positions, this track is full of no sides, which I don't find particularly fun to go for, but still, really enjoy this track, and unfortunately again, it's against really high competition, and it gets my 4th place rating out of the track number 2s. And for the plus-minus rating, I'm going to give this one a plus++. Onto track number 3 here, and I'm really not the biggest fan of this track. Of course, again, it's plagued by no slides, but that's really not the biggest issue. Generally, it's just a very slow playing track and very boring track. It still really doesn't come close to the worst track number 3s, as I rated this one just below average, getting an 8th place finish. And for the plus-minus rating for track 3, maybe it's a little bit harsh, but I am going to give it a minus rating. I have a lot to say about track number 4, and there's also so little to say about track number 4, including it being basically one input away from being a press forward track. Another sign that this track maybe should not have been made is that I can do a 360 in the middle of it and still get the author medal. Also, making tracks that are immediately being removed from ranked, maybe you should rethink making these tracks at all. Also, tracks like this hurt you in my overall rankings, as tracks that are this bad and score so lowly, getting 1 out of 13 points is a huge detriment. And that's right, this one gets last place out of the track number 4s, just behind last season's track number 4. And as for the plus-minus rating, of course, this one is going to get a triple minus. And for the last white series track here, we got track number 5. This is an alright track. Again, there's really not too much going on with it. We have a couple of fairly basic turns, and that's really all there is to the track. Unfortunately for track number 5, it is going to get an 8th place rating, the same as track number 3, though I would much rather play this than track number 3, just a bit unfortunate that it has a little bit higher competition in its own category. And as for the plus-minus rating, I would give this one a plus. Moving on to the white track scores here, we have a couple things to go over for this chart and for future charts. For example, each track should get 0 to 5 points gain. It should be impossible to gain more than that or lose points, but as we can see with Summer 20 here, it is going to lose a single point. This is due to a couple of things, including some errors on my part, where I gave a track too many or too little points based on where it ranked. Also, due to me replaying some of the tracks to compare them against the Summer 23 track and finding them better or worse than they previously were. But moving on to this chart here, we can see the Summer 23 season really didn't do all too well, getting a 9th place finish in the white series. And we can see how much that track number 4 really hurts right now, just scoring 1 point with that. Even if it scored average or slightly above average, it could jump up 3 spots to number 6. So not such a great showing here for the white tracks for the Summer 23 season. Moving on to the first green series track here with track number 6, I really feel like this track is missing something a little bit extra to put it into the next tier of tracks, as we just have a pretty long straight here at the start, a couple of fairly basic turns after that, and then an ice slide, but again, just really missing something a little bit extra for me, and that's why I gave this one a 7th place rating. And as for the plus-minus rating, again, it's missing that little something to put it into the next category, so we're going to give this one a plus, but put it at the top. And moving on to track number 7, it's a really, love-hate relationship for me on this one. If you can drive this track smooth, it feels extremely good, but if you don't, you hit corners, you get airtime, and then it just becomes a complete mess. But I feel like that's what makes it enjoyable to me. Like, it's such a simple concept, but so hard to drive that it makes it very fun to hunt. And this track gets the highest rating for me out of the Summer 23 season, getting 2nd place out of the track 7s. And despite the high ranking, it is only going to go in the plus tier. I understand that track 8 is kind of a meme at this point, and they like these bumpy downhill tracks, and at least this one is more drivable than past ones, but I just don't see anyone finding these particularly fun. And this track is very lucky that it's somewhat drivable because they have made so many worse track number 8, and this one is going to get 9th place. And just because of the fact that you have to drive slightly more than track number 4, I'm going to give this one a minus. As far as track number 9 goes, I don't love it, I don't hate it, it's not one that I would go out of my way to drive, but if I have to drive it, I will. One thing that could help it out a little bit is some automatic cam changes on the wall rides into cam 3, especially for the 2nd uphill. And unfortunately, this one has some high competition in the track 9 spots, and it's going to get 10th place, even though in a lot of other places it would not deserve this. And for the plus-minus rating, we are going to give this one a plus. And finally, the last green track here with track number 10, and I really enjoy this track. We got some plastic wiggles to gain some extra speed. Of course, we got the main feature, which is the plastic wall ride, which you can choose to risk as much as you want, going as high on the wall as you can. And then after that, when the next lap starts, we got sort of a NASCAR turn. I say the only part of the track that I don't care for is the length of the track. 3 laps just feels a little bit too long to me. It feels very repetitive, but the problem is 2 laps is going to be too short. So I really just don't know what to feel about the track length here. Once again, this one would probably rank a little bit higher in a lot of other green spots, but it's still going to get a 4th place rating, so it's really not all too bad, just missing out in the top 3. And as far as the plus-minus rating, I'm going to give this one a plus. And moving on to the green track recap, we can once again see Summer 23 here, not doing all too well, tying for 8th place with the 37 points. I really don't think this is as bad as it looks though, because from 5th place down to 8th place, we just have a 3-point difference, so it's a pretty close gap here. Of course, a non-meme track would help with track number 8's points, and unfortunately again for track number 9, only scoring 4 points for a decent track. So again here, I think the points are a little bit deceiving, and I think the green tracks are a little bit better than they show. Track number 11 is a bit of a mixed bag for me. I don't hate the track, I also don't love the track, not too much stands out to me about it. At the starts, we have a slow uphill climb, and generally, not the greatest idea to put a slow uphill climb at the start of your track, really not enjoyable. After that, we just have a longer straight and a couple of turns, so really it reflects in its score, getting 6th place out of the 13 tracks for its ranking. And as far as the plus-minus ranking goes for this track, I would give it a plus rating, and again, like number 6, it's kind of missing something a little bit extra. The perfectionist in me really likes track number 12, but it's really not the greatest track here, really just needing very slight inputs both on the downhill here and the uphill later on to get around or get into the boosters that you need. And yet again, something the Summer 23 season can't seem to avoid. For the 3rd series in a row, they're going to have a very poorly rated track, as this one is going to get ranked 11th out of 13 places. And with such a low ranking, you would think I would put this one in maybe a triple minus tier, but again, something about this track I like, and I'm just going to give it a minus. Track number 13 is honestly one of my favorites of this campaign, and maybe even one of the better blue tracks that they have ever made. Unfortunately, Nadeo does what they do and added a plastic wall bounce in order to reach the finish line. Luckily, unlike last season, they did not choose to just place a bunch of random rings around that you have to get into, so that helps it out a little bit. However, with a better finish line on this track, it probably would have gotten a 1st place, but this finish drops it down to a 3rd. And for the plus-minus rating, we're going to give this one a plus, but a better finish would give this one a triple plus. Track number 14 is in a extremely similar situation to track number 13, but we have a little bit extra holding it back. With the finish on this one, we have a penalty grass area with some bumps at the end of it. Really not a great overall feeling towards the end of this track. And in the middle here, coming up very shortly, we'll be going over a couple of bumps. Really, this part doesn't feel all that particularly good either, as the jump is not all that consistent. And just like track number 13, this one is going to get third place as well, with a little bit holding it back from that first place finish, but overall an extremely good track here. And also, just like track number 13, this translates to its plus-minus rating as well, with this one getting a plus+. However, I will put this one behind track 13. And moving on to the final blue track here with track number 15, and this is yet another very good track in my opinion. Starting out the track, we have a pretty quick start, and you also have the option to go safe and risky with the red and yellow boosters. But after that, a lot of full speed going on here. The only part I'm not particularly fond of is this sausage transition here. Really not all that smooth, but it's all right for what it is. This uphill here, very tricky, weaving through these dirt sections, going full speed. And then the final dirt turn here, also very tricky with the amount of speed you have. So yeah, really fun, unique, high-speed track here. Really like it, and that's why this one gets a 4th place rating. And that will once again reflect on its overall plus-minus score as well, as this one is going to get a plus+. And like track 14, I'm going to put this one below 13. And going over the Blue Series recap here, we can see the Summer 23 season doing a little bit better than the previous series, getting 6th place. However, again, like the last series, we have an absolutely terrible track here with track number 12, only scoring 3 points, so even an average or slightly above average track could put this one in a tie for second or an outright lead for second. But still, not an absolutely terrible placement here for Summer 23, being just above average. And moving on to the first Red Series track here with track number 16, we have a tech track. And if you're familiar with me, you know I'm not the biggest fan of tech tracks, and that's going to kind of reflect on this one as well. I think the thing that I generally don't like about this one is how blind some of the drifts are. And that is more prominent in the upcoming 2 drifts here. It is very hard to see which exit angle you are trying to go for, and generally I am not the hugest fan of that. Of course, this is all just personal bias of me really not liking tech tracks, and it's still not going to get a terrible rating here as I gave it 8th place. And even though 8th place would be a just below average finish, I don't believe this would be a minus track, and therefore on the plus and minus rating scale, I would give this one a plus. And moving on to track number 17 here, we have a mixed track with road and grass, and overall I think this is a pretty good one. The track still has a couple of things holding it back in my opinion, like the start of the track I find a little bit slow and boring compared to the later parts of the track. Also, the water bounces in the end, not the biggest fan of water bounces in general. I don't find water to be all that consistent of a surface, and it seems like you can sometimes randomly get slower bounces than other times. This track is still going to get a pretty good ranking for me. Out of the track number 17s, I gave this one 3rd out of 13. And that will reflect on its plus minus rating as well, as I'm going to give this one a plus+. Track 18 is an interesting track. Of course, we have the booster shenanigans at the start, but really I think the track is just way too basic for a Red Series track. I don't think I would have an issue with this one if it was an early blue or late green track, but with just 2 turns, I don't think this is a red-worthy track at all. And that, in combination with the reactor boost cut stuff, this track is not going to fare all too well, as I gave it 11th place. It also will not do too well in my plus minus rankings either, as I'm going to give this one a minus. Track number 19 is in a very weird spot for me, as I love full speed tracks. However, there is just something very off to this track for me. I feel like where it all starts to go wrong is where there is a looping section into an absolutely terrible placed checkpoint. Just does not feel good to drive at all. And then after that, we have some weirdly sharp hills that you need to get over. Very hard to do that, and the back half of the track just does not feel like a typical full speed track at all. It just feels like a complete mess. And even my love for full speed track can't really help it overcome this bad second half of a track, and I'm going to give it an average rating, giving it 7th place. And as far as the plus minus rating scale for this one, I think I would rate it a plus, and because it's a little bit more difficult, it makes it a little bit more fun to me than some of the earlier plus tracks, so we'll rate this one a plus and put it in the first spot. And moving on to track number 20, the last Red Series track, and I quite like the simplicity of this track. And maybe that's a bit contradictory to other statements I made, like track number 18 basically having 2 turns, while this one basically kind of has 1 turn. This one is more about precision. While track number 18 has such wide open spaces to make the turns, it makes it quite boring compared to the precision jumps needed earlier and later in this track. So again, I quite like this track, and that's why I gave it a 4th place finish, and on the plus minus rating scale, I would give this one a plus plus. Taking a look at the Red Series recap, we can see Summer 23 right in the middle of the chart, tying for 6th place. And yet another series with a bad track into here, with track 18 only scoring 3 points, and we're only 3 points off of 5th place, so even an average track would have put it there, and above average track maybe would have even put Summer 23 in 4th place. So all things considered, really not a terrible placement here for the Summer 23 Red tracks. And moving on to the first black track here with track number 21, we have another tech track here. And of course, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of tech tracks, though I did enjoy this one quite a bit more than track number 16. I say the worst offender in this track is the weird uphill sort of like wall ride thing in the middle of the track. It feels completely out of place and really does not fit the track at all. Also, this jump and landing right here never seems to be really all that smooth for me. Maybe it's my fault, maybe it's the track's fault, but if that was a little bit smoother, I feel like I would have liked it a little bit more as well. But again, the main offender is this weird uphill here, and if they added just a different drift for this section instead of this, this track could have got a much better rating for me, and I rated it 7th place, so really just a pretty average score here for track 21. Also going to get a pretty average rating here of a plus. And we are on to track number 22. We have the bobsleigh track here. So if you love bobsleigh, you are probably going to like this one. If you don't like bobsleigh, well, you're probably not going to like this one. For me, I think this is a perfectly fine track. You know, I'm not the hugest fan of bobsleigh myself, but this map, works perfectly fine. I really don't have any complaints about it. It pretty much is what it is, and honestly, it is probably one of the better bobsleigh tracks they have made, especially later stage bobsleigh. And again, despite not being the biggest fan of bobsleigh myself, this track did pretty well against the track number 22s, as I gave this one 4th place. And as far as the plus minus rating scale goes, it's hard to give any bobsleigh track for me a plus plus, and this one is right on the edge of that, and I would give it a plus, but we'll put it all the way at the top. Next up, we have track number 23, the mixed surface track with pretty much every surface. We got ice and bobsleigh at the start. We got some dirt, grass, road, and even a little bit of plastic at the end. And I really like this track, and it probably would have been my favorite track out of the entire campaign, but it's held back by the beginning. And again, at the beginning, we have the ice downhill, which is whatever. It's a little bit boring. It's fine for what it is. But the main culprit is the bobsleigh. In the bobsleigh, we are turning towards the right, and on the exit, we need to be turning left out of it. It really just does not feel smooth. It does not feel good to drive, and I absolutely hate that part of the track. And like I said, without that little bit there, this probably would have been my favorite of the campaign, and it probably would have made this my favorite out of the track number 23s, but unfortunately it hurts it a pretty good deal here, as it's going to drop it down to 4th place. And for the plus minus rating on this one, still really overall, I like the track, and I'm going to give it a plus plus. Next up, we have track number 24 here, all dirt track with a couple of water bounces. Could do without those water bounces. Just again, not the biggest fan of water in general, but they don't take too much away from this track, honestly, and it is my favorite track of the entire campaign. And really, those water bounces are pretty much the only thing I don't like about the track, and that is a very minor and kind of personal complaint. Otherwise, it drives extremely smoothly. I do wish it was maybe about 10 seconds or so longer, and I think that would make it even better because it is on the shorter side, but overall an extremely good track here, and it's going to get a 3rd place rating. And as far as the plus-minus rating for this track goes, I think you know where it's going. It is going in the triple plus tier. And here we are with track number 25, the last track of the entire campaign. And we're pretty much going to find lots of everything here. We got some tech, plastic, and grass. Also some wall rides, some jumps. Of course, we got reactor boosts. Thankfully, as of now, I don't think there's a cut with that. But who knows, people like to do those reactor boost cuts. Hopefully there is none, but I would not be surprised. But overall, this is just a fun and good track. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I really don't have any complaints about this track. Overall, I think it's just a good track. And this also reflects in its rating I gave this track, as well as I gave this one 4th place out of the track 25s. And as far as the plus-minus rating for this track goes, I don't think it's quite good enough for me to give it a triple plus, but it is a very good track, and that is going to give it a plus plus. And moving on to the Black Series recap, we can see the Summer 23 season scoring extremely well here, getting 48 out of 65 possible points and tying for 2nd place. And unlike every other series of tracks in this campaign, there really was no terrible score here. The worst scoring track was track 21, getting 7 points, which really isn't all too bad. So just a job well done on the black tracks. I found them all to be extremely well done, and hope to see this continue going forward. Next up, we have the overall score for the entire campaign, and here we can see the Summer 23 season right in the middle, getting a 7th place finish. Now, there is some good news and some bad news with this average ranking. The good news is that it is reversing the downward trend of the past few seasons as it comes ahead of the Winter 23 and Spring 23 seasons. The bad news is, well, it's just an average campaign. But the score here, I don't think, tells all the story, because again, we have so many poorly rated tracks here, with tracks 4, 8, 12, and 18 all doing very poorly. Now, I went ahead and got the scores for all the campaigns without tracks 4, 8, and 12. I did not include 18 in this because these 3 tracks are the ones that seem to have the most commonly poorly rated. So without those, we can see Summer 23 here coming in 5th place, and it's only 6 points behind 4th place as well. So if that track 18 was a little bit better too, it could have even jumped up to there and been a above average campaign. So sometimes you got to take a broader look at things, and if you take some of the very poorly rated tracks out and replace them with some average tracks, you're going to get a much better score. Now, briefly going back to the tier list, a couple things to go over here. As far as the difference between last season had 0 triple plus tracks and now we have 1. It had 7 plus tracks and now we have 10, so an addition of 3 tracks there. In the plus category, we went down 1 from 10 to 9, but one of those tracks could be higher rated now, so really not all things are bad there. In the minus tier, we went from 4 to 3 tracks, so that is a good reversal there. More importantly, from the minus tier, we went from 4 tracks to 1, so very good improvement in that category. Unfortunately, we did add a track to the triple minus, going from 0 to 1. So overall, I think we have a nice collection of tracks here this season. Of course, there's a couple of standout bad ones, but I think there are plenty of good ones to overcome that. And that is going to conclude today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to like the video and subscribe. If you are interested, there is a link to my Discord in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next season with the next tier list.